So we are looking at Algebra 1 Regions, June 2019, question number 28. This one asks us to solve 5x squared equals 180 algebraically. Now, before we do that, I do just want to show a way that you could get a cheap free point here or there in case you're freaked out by trying to solve for an x squared. So one thing you should notice if you are a TI Inspire Pro here, if you've been using that as you've been prepping for the regions, is anytime you've got an x squared, you should be thinking, I know that's going to be a quadratic. It'll either be my smiley face or rainbow, right? A parabola. And I know if I'm trying to solve it, that I'm looking for the solutions, or we also call them the roots, right? So if we can graph this guy and find the roots, well, those should be my solutions. So I have a graph open up here. Now, normally when we try to graph our quadratics, we want it to be equal to 0. And we can do that, and I might as well show that in a moment as well. But even if you're feeling super not confident and you don't know how to get this to be equal to 0, I can just hit delete button here, change this to a relation, and just plug in 5x squared equals 180. And you'll notice that we have a root right over here. Looks like it's at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0. And then we have another root over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 6, 0. And those are our two roots. I'm telling you right now, if you get x equals 6 and negative 6, you're going to get one free point for that on this one. Now, the tracing is acting kind of weird here on this TI calculator. I'm actually not sure when I trace this one. It acts kind of weird where it's not stepping along the x, it's stepping along the y's. Maybe that's some weird relation thing. I thought trace worked just fine in relations. And also, it didn't graph my actual parabola because I should have hit it over here by now. So in case you do want to use the trace and see exactly, you want the calculator to tell you, hey, here's the coordinate 6, 0, what you can do is just convert this to be an equal 0 question. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to rewrite it, 5x squared equals 180. And if I want to set this equal to 0, well, I can just subtract 180 from both sides to get it be equal to 0, minus 180 on both sides. These will cancel, and I'll have 5x squared minus 180 equals 0. And this is kind of our traditional quadratic that we can graph as a function, and the trace should work better here. So let's try it out. So I'm going to make a new graph here. I don't want to save. Make a graph. And now I'm just going to graph 5x squared minus 180. 5x squared minus 180. Now the trace, you can see there's actually a little bit of curvature to this. It actually made the parabola. Oops, not a trace of 11, a trace of 1. Menu trace, graph trace. And there's our vertex, and we can now move over to the roots. Here I find, oops, there it is. Oh, I went too far. 6, 0, and then I can go, I think I just pressed it 12 times. Let's see if I end up at the right spot. Negative 6, 0. So again, those are my roots. Now, if you do it this way, maybe you want to say you graph it, maybe you draw a little sketch of it, or you can just say 6 and negative 6. You'll get 1 point. If you want to get the full credit on this one, we are going to have to actually solve it by hand the right way. So, right, because I asked you to solve it algebraically. And that's actually not too hard. So we saw 2 ways to kind of cheat yourself some points on this question in the calculator. But let's do it the real proper way, right? So I'm going to clear this out a little bit. And I'll leave the 6 and negative 6, but let's start over here. All right. So I'm going to draw my line here. We've got 5x squared equals 180. Now, I need to get x alone. That's what I need to do when I'm solving. And to get x alone, I've got 5x and then squared. The 5 and the squared I got to get rid of eventually. I'm going to start by dividing both sides by 5. Divide both sides by 5. Here the 5s will cancel. I remain with x squared. It's getting a little more alone. If you want to do this in your calculator, there is no shame in tossing into your calculator. 180 divided by 5 I find 36. And here's a part where a lot of students do get kind of confused. They get stuck here. You need to remember that if I have a square, the inverse of a square is the square root. Now, if I square root on the left side of this equation, I have to do the same thing on the right side of the equation. Square root of x squared, the square and the square root cancel. I'm remaining with just x here. And then square root of 36, most people will say, well, square root of 36 is 6, but be careful. Do not forget that, the way we get the square root of 36 is because, well, 6 times 6 makes 36, right? That's how we find out what the square root of something is what times itself makes that number. There is always a second pair of numbers that will do that, and that's the negative pair. If I do negative 6 times negative 6, I am going to end up with a positive 36. So for this, if you leave this just here, you did all the work right. If you leave it like this, you're still only getting 1 point. You got to give us a plus or minus 6, and now you got your full credit there. Alrighty, so that was question number 28 in kind of like 3 different ways, right? We did it on the calculator, we did it on the calculator again, but had it as a function instead of a relation, and then we did it by hand as our last one. So hopefully you were able to get some help out of this question.